In our first session, we reviewed policy, why you can do CPL on your campus in your local area. And then we went into some actual crosswalks, some articulations through MAP with work groups for industry into industry and apprenticeship into college coursework. So you know it can be done. We have examples of when it has been done and transcribed for our students. And then we talked about building your strike team. Now we're going into some implementation. So we really want to get our nails dirty and know that in the Padlet, I'll describe the use of the Padlet here in a second, but it's anonymous. So there's no dumb questions or no dumb statements. We really want to get your feedback about the current situation on your campus, right? So the agenda for our session will be different than first session, as the question asked in the chat. We're going to start with some case studies. And it's really just to be thought-provoking. We do want your feedback in terms of on the Padlet and in the chat. And those that are on the council work group, maybe give some insight as to how you would handle these situations. We're going to use 3 case studies really quickly, about 5 minutes each. And then I'm going to hand it off to Gwyer to speak to the MAP counselor work group. We're going to unveil a little bit of the work we've been doing over the fall and some potential work we can do moving into the spring. And then lastly, Natalie's going to take charge and show us the MAP platform, the actual technology of MAP. A lot of folks really rely on that and they lean on MAP technology, but this work with CPL, there's so much of the human element. It's probably about 80–90% of it is the human element before you even get to the technology. So technology piece is vital. It's important. It's one of those prongs, but it's the technology alone will not handle our credit for prior learning needs for our students. Next slide. As we had in the first session, and hopefully if you were in military or in administration, you have the same. We have the Padlet right here that you can link to through the QR code, or Natalie has posted it in the chat. We want your feedback. We're going to gain from your feedback, and you're going to gain from your peers' feedback. We might be experts to a certain level, but you have expertise in your local context in your district. So we do want to hear from you as we grow. Session's going to be recorded. Lenny, are you in here to record? I'm hoping Lenny's in here to record.
Yes, and it is recording.
Beautiful, thank you. We do want you to know that for accommodation purposes, you do have access to closed captioning through Zoom down at the base of your Zoom portal. And we will be loading in our contact information towards the end so you can connect with us in this session and in the main session. But do feel free to use the chat as you did last time. We try to keep up with the questions as much as we can, but we are kind of juggling a few balls here. So have some grace with us as well. Next slide. Integrating CPL on your campus. We're going to do these case studies. And really this is to be thought-provoking. The honest truth of, you may not be a counselor, but we want to expose you to the front lines of this credit for prior learning piece. I had a colleague, a peer, tell me this, and I really appreciated this comment. We are aiming in this effort to get from telling a student, sorry, we don't offer credit for that, to we don't offer credit for that yet. We want to be that advocate that says, why not? Yes, it might take me a few hours of my week to process this along and to ask the right people the right questions, and I might get some roadblocks, but that yet is where we want to get. And then in a year or two from now, it's always we offer credit for that or we don't offer credit, because there's times where it's going to be a no, but we want to be able to say yes when it's appropriate. Next slide. Okay, let me give you a couple minutes on this, and I'm not going to read through it verbatim. I'll let you read through the slide. But this really comes from a traditional experience with credit for prior learning. All right, so if there's any counselors in the crowd, how many of us have seen this when someone comes from a private school or a prep school and mom or dad's in the room with them and the student doesn't speak as much? And mom or dad, brags, very proud of their child. It probably could be me too. And just saying, hey, they have these AP units, they took some college courses, this is a population that we serve, and we are open access in the California community colleges. So it's not that we should look down on that. That's a population that's important to us, and that student needs us as well, right? But it's a different type of student with a different life experience. I'm going to ask you to go over to the Padlet, put some comments. What would you do as the next steps? Someone says they have AP scores. They took some AP courses. They went to Arizona State, and they have units coming into college because they took prior college while they were in high school, that dual enrollment kind of thing. What would be your next steps? Process that through and think, how would you serve that student? Please put some comments on the Padlet.
Terence, do you see there's a request in the chat for you to read out the scenario? Would you be
Yes,
okay doing that?
100%. Will
Okay.
do. Sarah comes into her first counseling appointment with you. She comes from a highly regarded local prep high school. Her mother joins the session. Mom steps right in and says, quote, "My daughter completed 3 AP courses and has 12 units completed while in college, in high school, I should say, sorry, misprint, from Arizona State University. What are your next steps with the student to ensure that her credit is applied to her degree program and her SEP?" Now, I'm going to add a question in here in the chat. What documentation, how do you get the documentation? And what's the documentation flow? Do you know what that documentation flow is if you're a counselor, right? Does your college accept that? Do you have a pass along process to receive credit and apply the credit there in a degree progress report or an SEP, student educational plan? Okay. This one should be a bit easier, right? This flows with what we typically do. And that's the intent of this slide, is to show, yeah, we accept AP scores, right? There's a catalog policy. There's a matrix that we can look at depending on what the goal of the student is. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, now I'll read through this one as well. Try to read slow. I have a problem with speaking slowly. But this next student, scenario number 2, Calvin shows up 15 minutes early to his scheduled 6 p.m. counseling appointment. You're doing the evening shift, and the student shows up 15 minutes early. Your earlier appointment was a no-show, so you have availability. He is wearing a work shirt with his name embroidered on it and with the Toyota label. With him, he carries a folder with documents he said are his resume and evidence of his auto exams, his words. He states, quote, "I am getting a bit older and have been an auto mechanic for 15 years, but I am thinking of coming to college to learn business marketing and sales. Maybe I can use my background to get myself into a desk job," end quote. How do you engage this student? So again, I'll add the same question. What documents do you need from him? Do you know what you'd ask of this individual, this working adult? Gwyer, do you have any comments with that?
My name's Gwyer, Schuyler. I'm on the counselor work group. Thanks, Terence. I think one thing that's running through my head is that every college, we're all at different stages, right? In terms of how our process is set up. Some of you might have processes set up where you already have articulations with your automotive department, and you already in your head, you're thinking, okay, I need the ACE certifications because we have that articulation. I can line him up to get CPL credit right away. Others might say, you know what, this is new territory for us. And you may not know how to proceed, but that's okay. That's why we're building a counselor work group. That's why we have MAP work group overall, is to support each other no matter what stage you're at.
Yep, 100%. And it's okay for you as the counselor to go and ask questions, right? Maybe that auto instructor already has an articulation set up. It's just not transparent to the rest of the college. And the evaluator and A&R is working directly with auto, and maybe student services, the counselors or advisors or what have you, are out of the loop with that. That can happen at campuses, right? We all are working hard for students, and sometimes the communication loop isn't always cleaned up. I added in the chat the question similar to what Gwyer said, is who else is involved in the review of this process? How long would that process take at your campus? If you don't already have an articulation set up and you're not fully implementing MAP, could you get this done in a semester for this individual and get back to them? So this is a scenario that comes from any of you that have counseled and done the evening shifts as an adjunct and worked till 10 p.m. the only counselor on duty. You have to be a Swiss Army knife and figure these things out. So again, this is to compel thought. Apply it to your local campus. Natalie, next slide. All right, scenario number 3. Rosa arrives on campus and meets with you as a staff advisor in the Career Center. She is wearing her Navy OIF hat. That's a Operation Iraqi Freedom hat, showing that she's a combat vet, and appears very serious but nervous. She explains that her fellow veteran goes to your college and receives some credit for her military service, and she wants to use her GI Bill to start her education. She has a hard copy of her Joint Services transcript, that's the Department of Defense record, to show the training and experiences she had, but also is interested in computer networking as her job in the Navy is related to this, and she has collected some certifications since she was discharged 3 years ago. What is your next step with Rosa?
I see a comment on the Padlet. Somebody who's at a college with MAP says upload the JST in MAP is one of the first steps. And now this might be the role of the CPL coordinator. You as a counselor, if you're a CPL counselor, may or may not have access to MAP. If you're a general counselor, your first step may be to connect with the Veterans Office or to connect with the CPL coordinator or CPL counselor.
And I have one in the chat that I put in there. What follow-up sessions would be required? Do you need to do you have to have a process in place to do follow-up sessions, or cue yourself in your whatever Outlook reminder you have to follow up with the student in case it's going to take 2 to 3 sessions to hash through this? Leslie?
Hello, everyone. Sorry, I can't turn on my camera. I'm having some difficulties with that, but I wanted to share what we do at Moreno Valley College. We're pretty new on this process, but we are trying to implement this initiative as much as possible. What I do in all of my sessions with all of my students regarding of what their, regardless of what their major is we advise them to submit the JSTs because we never know. Sometimes the veterans themselves are not aware of what type of training they have completed that may be applicable to their current program. So we always advise them to submit the JSTs. That's also how they're going to get credit for Area E going into the CSU system. In a case like this, what I would do is I would advise the student to submit any certificates or certifications that she completed after she was discharged, and talk to the CPL coordinator, which in my case would be her evaluator, Harleen. She's amazing. And we get the paperwork started, and we tell the students, you know, we don't know if this is going to be approved, but we're going to try. And earlier, Terence said that it might take 3 hours over a week. I actually think it will take a lot more than that. We ask the students to be patient. It could take weeks. But one thing I do is I follow up with students. I let them know that it's in the process and the paperwork has been submitted, and to just hang on tight. And I would advise students to avoid taking some courses that perhaps align with what they may have completed as part of their professional training, to ensure they're not repeating any courses. So that's what we do. And again, we're on the very early stages of the implementation of this initiative, and we hope to, catch up to Norco. Thank you.
That's awesome, Leslie. And so many students are unique in their backgrounds and experiences. There may be, say, the certifications. I know the Riverside District has done great work with looking at certain networking certifications. Well, it may not be that specific certification that was already articulated. This may be a new one. So you are waiting on that faculty member, the decision maker on that process, and then the AO, who probably has backlogged work too, and maybe your evaluator. So some things do take time. Leslie gave a great hint, though. Those placeholders on an SEP, on a student educational plan, are great. You say, hey, let's hold off. Let me write you a note. We're looking at reviewing this for a course pass along for CPL. And we're going to get back to this, but you need to see me in November before we register for the next courses, right? So we make sure we have an answer, and I can re-nudge my workflow to ensure that there was a review. So I appreciate that. And this exercise was really just to stimulate how difficult it is for our reentry adult students. In my opinion, my humble opinion, we need to treat this as AP exams for adult reentry students. right? That we need to see it as the same. Yet as you look, that number one scenario is so familiar and frankly so easy for many faculty and counselors, yet scenario 2 and 3 really gets us spinning. Ooh, that's a lot of work. That's a really difficult scenario to figure out. We want equitable treatment among all of our students if we are to remain as open access institutions. Next slide. Now we're going to move on to the counselor, the MAP counselor work group that we've started just this fall. If you hadn't heard about it, it's okay. We started through another group, and we asked for recommendations, and we're growing. So I'm going to hand the baton over to Gwyer again, so she can review a little bit about what that work group is, and if you have any interest.
Thanks so much, Terence. Yes, okay, so my name again is Gwyer, and I'm a counselor at Santa Barbara City College, and I actually just happen to also be the faculty CPL coordinator. There was a question in the chat about that. Does the CPL coordinator have to be a counselor? No, but we do, and I understand our, Sonia Christian, the chancellor, is recommending that every college has a CPL coordinator and a CPL counselor, at least one, right? We all have specializations. While we all are generalists, we might also specialize. What we're learning in our work with CPL is it does take some specialized knowledge. And so it is, I think, an emerging best practice for a college to have at least one designated CPL counselor. So what I've just talked about is maybe a topic that we would talk about at the counselor work group. It's a free-flowing kind of work group. We're meeting every other Friday. Our current members, Terence is our facilitator and doing an awesome job, Terence. Myself, we have Jethro Midget from Norco College. We've got Fabiola Johnson from Bakersfield College, Janelle Brecky, Norco College, Leslie Alarcon. Thanks again, Leslie, Moreno Valley College. And then we've had our chancellor's office representatives, Billy Wagner and Aaron Larson, join us as well. That was an added treat. And it's a Zoom format, 1 hour every couple weeks. It really is a place where we can come together. Terence may have specific topics that we need to focus on, but it's also a place where we can start to, dig in to issues that are coming up on our campuses, things that we need to think about system-wide. So this work group, we've got outcomes that we'd like to, reach. We'd like to build tools for counselors across the system. We'd like to build professional development materials and even have trainings. We'd like to explore the possibility of setting up a strong communication hub for counselors who work with CPL. So a special interest group, and whether we have a listserv for that, whether we use Vision Resource Center or just some other way that we can be in contact with each other. Because sometimes we might have sticky issues, and it would be nice to have somewhere where we can bring them. And this counselor work group, we have a direct line to the chancellor's office. So if we have something that we're really stuck on, you could bring it to the counselor work group. We could take it to the MAP work group, and even to the chancellor's office if we need to solve a problem. If one college is facing it, probably we all will at all of our colleges at some point. We are looking for additional members. So please take a snapshot of this or put your name in the Padlet if you're interested. It is a great opportunity to just dive deeper and really help inform how this is unfolding statewide. And Terence, maybe you could take a look at that chat that's coming through. That would be great. So one of the projects that we've just been working on over the last few meetings is to look at Touchpoints, credit for prior learning Touchpoints for students. How do we make students aware of CPL as an option? And we started to look at the student's journey, right? Before a student even goes to college, how will we start to educate the community about credit for prior learning? And then we looked at steps to enrollment. How do we incorporate CPL into that? also once a student is enrolled in classes and graduation. We've started to develop a draft document that is in the Padlet. And Natalie, I'm not sure if we want to also post it as a PDF for people in the chat, just in case they don't have access to the Padlet. But this draft is, again, just kind of brainstorming. The counselor work group we're coming up with these touch points. I'll just give you some examples. So if we're looking at, before a student even comes to college, how can we start to get the word out about CPL? We can do marketing and outreach in the community. We can start working on college partnerships with employers. We can hold college events in the community. We can advertise credit for prior learning on the website of the college with an inquiry form for the general public to request more information. And of course, we can post flyers and posters, banners on campus so that people who walk onto our campus, are being exposed to credit for prior learning. And then the steps to enrollment. A student has committed to begin the process to get enrolled. It is so important that we start to identify students who might be eligible for CPL. Instead of waiting for a student to identify themselves, let's try to get that information as early as possible. Let's have a question on the CCC Apply application that asks about credit for prior learning. And then let's have staff do follow-up to those people who indicated they might have credit. They might have prior learning that could lead to CPL. Let's look at our orientation processes and incorporate CPL into orientation. Let's look at my college, for example, we use Comevo as the online platform for our online orientations. And I've just started to try to get CPL incorporated there. We have a slide in our orientation that links to that inquiry form. So another way, a student in orientation, the very early days, they're going to say, oh, yes, I do have credentials or licenses. Yeah, I'm going to add my name here. And then that will come to me and I'll be able to follow up with them. Also, however your college is managing new student counseling or class planning, we'd want to make sure to integrate a conversation about CPL with our students. So those are all steps to enrollment. We can look at, once a student is enrolled in classes, they're attending classes, we want to have college-wide communication to students by email or whatever platform you have to communicate with students. We want to post flyers in classrooms, especially in CTE classrooms, right? Where career tech programs are really primed for CPL. When it comes to counseling in particular, a couple things. We need to look at our degree audit systems and help to make sure that our college is integrating CPL into our degree audits so that we see accurate reflections of a student's status towards their goal. And in a counseling appointment, we need to make sure that we have those conversations. Just like Terence was saying, we often say, do you have AP credit? Do you have already any coursework from another college? And we should add the question, do you have any learning that happened outside of college that we might be able to give you credit for? For example, do you have any licenses or industry credentials? Or have you done any other kind of work-based training? So this is the kind of question that we'll need to add to our standard questions we're asking students. I think we had examples from others on our work group. I think Jethro gave the example of a student intake form, and many colleges in our counseling centers, we might have an intake form where we're gathering information from students in advance of an appointment, and we'd recommend a question about credit for prior learning, right? So that we can also, as counselors, have heads up on that. There's a lot more detail about all the other touch points in that document. Terence, I could go on and on. I'm not sure how much time. I don't want to take up too much time.
Yeah, Natalie's moving us along, which she's supposed to do. But can you touch on a little bit about graduation application and transfer? Because I thought that was an intriguing idea that came from the group as well.
Oh, sure. So in terms of graduation, let's say we haven't captured a student in an earlier stage, and we're at that final stage towards graduation. It's another touch point where we could make sure, was there anything that we overlooked for the student in terms of credit for prior learning, and have a question on the college graduation application about that. We also know that when it comes to our transfer partners, the Cal State University or the UC, the Cal State University is on board with their credit for prior learning policies. And I would turn to, we need to have conversation about how does credit for prior learning get asked on our transfer partners applications as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because this CSU mentor does ask for your joint services transcript, but does it necessarily ask about industry experience or work experience? I can't recall a point in that. Maybe I need to do a deeper dive, but there should be a conversation about that, as making it maybe more prominent on other types of standardized exams or industry experience on generalized applications to our universities. So I loved that. That was something that kind of came up from the group. Let's go to the next slide. One of the big items that came from the group about touch points and letting folks understand about potential of credit for prior learning was in the classroom. Many of these folks are in CTE areas, and we need to have that open line of communication and not be siloed so much, and really have, cross divisional conversations. But it's not up to the counselors to say, instructional faculty, you must put this in your syllabus. So we actually leaned on an instructional faculty member and said, hey, this work group, this counselor work group is suggesting there's a statement in the syllabus, especially in the introductory courses and CTE courses. Could you come up with something? The faculty member not only came up with this statement, but also said, I'm going to go to my academic senate and see if I can make this required for all syllabi across our district. So they were so fired up and so interested in this touch point concept for students to get more exposure and opportunity to take advantage of credit for prior learning, that they want to make it institutionalized within the district. So this is something you potentially could bring back to your campus, to your academic senate for consideration. As a former faculty member, I'm never about things that are required. I like things that are, not compelled, but hey, encouraged, inspired. So it might not be something that you require, but this is a great comment that an instructional faculty member came to us with to consider for adding to syllabi. Next slide. Okay, MAP for adult learners. Let's get into the technology. Let's get into the platform. Many of you really want to see this thing. It's great to see, and demos are wonderful. And Natalie's going to go through this, but understand everybody's standard operating procedures and workflows are different. At some campuses, the evaluator is the alpha and the omega on articulation. Some it's the counselor or the AO. Most of us, when it's course for course, it needs to go to that discipline chair, but some it goes to a dean. So MAP platform will look different for different colleges based off of your workflow. That's again why Sam said it is a design build project, because it morphs to your institution for the approval process. So Natalie's going to go through a little bit of this non-military CPL. Here's way too many words on a slide, and this is the description of what MAP really is as a planning tool. We needed to put this in here, but yes, it's kind of gaudy with all the words. It's a little crazy there, but you'll have that to bring back to your campus when people ask you what is MAP. You can give them the essay. MAP really is a planning tool for the counselor and the students. It's a repository of your credit for prior learning articulations, and then a place to collaborate. That's really, when it comes down to the basics, you're using your pass along workflow or your curriculum workflow to get an agreement, and then it keeps that repository of that ASE certification A1 for Auto 100 at your campus, and you never have to do it again. It's set in stone. The next student comes with that certification. The counselor will see that. You can actually take those out. It doesn't interface with your SIS or with tests, but you can extract those out and then place that on TES or College Source. Many schools like to do that because your counselors are more used to using tests. But it really is a planning tool for students and the counselor. It's a repository of articulations and a collaborative space. You can adopt from other colleges. I think that's the big piece that we want to push today. And it's for your evaluators and A&R to look into MAP to be able to then transcribe. When something's fully implemented, ready to go, they can then transcribe it for a student. So it helps with that petition process. Natalie?
Thanks, Terence. Well, for some of you, this might be the very first time you're seeing what the MAP platform looks like. Some of you are in it quite often, so I'm going to be doing a walkthrough of what it looks like for credit for prior learning specifically. You will hear some different terms that are used across MAP and are consistent across MAP, the big one being exhibits. Terence, do you want to go into a little bit of what an exhibit is?
Yes, I missed that. Thank you. So the American Council on Education, when they bring in faculty to review a military course or military experience, what they do is those faculty create an exhibit. It's basically like the documentation that goes with your pass along. So what I perceive this is, say someone goes to the University of Pacific up in the Central Valley and comes over to Merced College and they took English 1A at University of Pacific. Well, I, as the counselor, need to do a pass along to give credit for our freshman composition to create an articulation. So I have to add catalog information, evidence, maybe a syllabus. That exhibit is the evidence in the background, the documentation that a faculty member needs to do a review for an articulation. That's what I would define an exhibit as.
Thank you. So when it comes to MAP, how it can be useful, it's kind of going to go through here. This is creating an exhibit. So this is an actual example articulated at West LA. And we're going to go through, it's a small screen, but I will have pop-ups to hopefully make it a little bit easier to read. This exact exhibit was one that we talked about in the previous session. If you were in session 1, it's a collaborative exhibit that was done in the EMS work group that was talked about with Megan Corey earlier. In these exhibits, it's a good place to put all of the information that needs to be reviewed, right? It is that collection of information. So choosing an exhibit title that is easily adoptable by other college. For this one, California Emergency Medical Technician, obvious to the point. You can choose what type of learning it is, or what type it is, industry, certification, credit by exam, whether it's military or portfolio review. The specific learning mode, so whether that's industry training, an apprenticeship, high school coursework. And then here, the status of this exhibit. So the status of this package. If it's in that active mode, it's either in that pass along process or it's already been approved and it is currently active at your institution. Draft mode, you might still be working on this exhibit, so finalizing the wording. And historical would be for an exhibit or that package that is no longer in use at your school. So whether that is that the course is no longer offered or that CPL is expired, it would move into that historical status. There's plenty of spots to put in different dates, important end dates, hours, versions, as well as unique exhibit IDs so that you can easily search for all of these and apply them to multiple students at once. Specific general notes, who it's been reviewed by and who it was last updated by. So it goes into pretty specific details of all of this information. Here we get into another word in MAP that is very consistent, where we talk about credit recommendations. These are specifically based on the college courses that they are modeled after. So this credit recommendation here from West LA, half a unit in basic life support for the healthcare provider, that comes from West LA's course that you'll see in a moment. But here in these credit recommendations, the notes that go along with it, West LA chose to do this here as a way to support this package when it goes to a student. So someone might come in with their EMT license, but maybe their CPR card is expired and they're about to renew it next week, or maybe they just can't find it yet. This gives you the opportunity to apply just that 9 hours and leave off the CPR, the basic life support. If they come back in, you can always apply that basic life support as well. But this is something, part of the package that will always go together for those EMT students with their California EMT license. This is where those college courses come into play. You see the credit recommendations from above. the college courses that were associated with it from West LA. So there's Allied Health 21, Basic Life Support for the Healthcare Provider. You'll notice course title is exactly the same as that credit recommendation. And if there was a CID, this would fall in here too, making it easier for other colleges to view and adopt. You can open it up, view more information about those credit recommendation notes, catalog descriptions, student learning outcomes, and details on the exhibit. There's also a place to put that evidence of competency, whether it's a certificate, license, that recency, if it needs to be active, or if it doesn't need to be active, and what that looks like here in order for students to be eligible for this CPL. As well as finally, rubric items. If you have any scoring details or any documents that you might want to upload, that is all available here when you're creating an exhibit, so you can have a full comprehensive plan to go through that package, that pass along process, and to go back on to look at and make sure that what is happening for one student can be happening for all that have that evidence. This really comes into putting that student first, student planning here. In the student intake, this is where all of the student information is stored. So again, this is a quick run through. If you are a MAP college, we'll absolutely give more detailed training. But here you'll notice we have a student put into this West LA's student log, and their CPL plan is a really great way to see a CPL summary report. It is an excellent form that you can email or print. So for this student, John Doe, we've applied that exhibit that I just showed, the California EMT exhibit. It's a great way to send this off, whether that's for transcription, maybe you want to send a copy to the student. It's a great way to see all the information all together. You have the student information, their applied MAP credits, and if they had any on their program that or on their plan that were not applied, but maybe would have been eligible, those will show here as well. So the student and others are aware of what was or what will be transcribed and what is not eligible.
Natalie, we have about 5 more minutes, and I do want to underscore that if you are a MAP college, your first few exhibits, our team actually does work through MAP with you to create those exhibits. Once you're riding the bike, you're going to be fine, but we can be those training wheels when you first begin. So don't let this scare you with a whole new interface. Victoria does have a question.
Yes, thank you. I am one of those people on the training wheels. And Natalie has been wonderful with us and very patient, guiding us through these MAP uploading evidence for students. But I have a question. If a student has an exhibit that does not apply to his CPL, what he was granted from the college, as an evaluator, can we remove that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Or are we
And that
going
would
to
be,
get a...
if they're not eligible for it, absolutely you can remove that. This is specifically for students who show that evidence. They came in, they said, hey, here's my California EMT license, here's my basic life support card, that are both active. So that was applied to that student's plan. So that's the example there.
Yeah, Victoria, you can remove it. And there may be reasons to remove it, but there also might be reasons to retain things that are denied, so you have evidence of what's denied. Because if something's ever coming back in terms of audit, or you have another student that comes in with the same item, your counselor would know. American Council Education is an easy one. If your auto instructor says an LAR guy from the Marine Corps doesn't get auto 100, you want to have that notated somewhere that it's denied, so then the next student doesn't have to petition, right? So there could be reasons to keep it, there could be reasons to remove, but you can do either.
Going into adopting an exhibit. So say you're another college coming in and you see, you want to see what's available. Why reinvent the wheel when it's already here? So this one here, we use City College of San Francisco. They were actually part of that collaboration. And they can see here all of the different exhibits created by different colleges. One thing I would like to point out here is they can see the exhibits. They cannot see specific student information from another college. So that is specific to the people who have access to their own college, their own students. It's a great way to come in and just browse, see exactly what will work for your school, whether that's through looking through these different options to see what makes sense for you. One big thing here that I want to point out is students. In this column here, it shows you how many students are already filed under that exhibit. So for that California EMT, you can see there's already 17 students applied at West LA. Or even if you're looking real estate appraiser trainee, there's 150 students there that are applied. So it's a good way to just quality control, see where it's at. Is it in the works? Are there actual students receiving this and from this exhibit here? Again, when it comes to adopting, just like when you're implementing it, it all starts with that student. So back in the student intake, you would be putting in your student's information. And once you do, you have the option to edit that student. It brings you to their specific workspace where you can add or remove, like we were talking about Victoria, that map exhibit that student is eligible for. Here in San Francisco City College, we open up what map exhibit we want to add in here. And you can search by college name, that map exhibit, or the title. And it adds it right onto their plan. You'll notice here, it does have the credit recommendation, but college course is blank. That's because here at San Francisco, we have a different college course that we need to apply to this credit recommendation to this exhibit. Using the dropdown, articulate it as a course, and you put your own course information in there. So EMT 12 would be San Francisco's. It has their catalog descriptions, their top codes, student learning outcomes, and it's an easy way to compare that exhibit to all of that course information. Once that's inputted, you can see it's been put on that student's plan. It is now in the faculty stage. So that is the start of moving it through that pass along process. The evaluator now has put it in here. It's in the faculty stage with that new college course, and that CPL plan status turns to yellow, meaning that it is in process. So this student here is not quite ready for transcription because it's in that pass along process. But once it goes through faculty or the AO or whatever your local pass along process is, that's when it will be ready to go into transcription. Here is an example of what that transcription might look like. This is an example from Moreno Valley College for the same EMS EMT. And this, if you were in our first session as well, you saw them talk through what this looks like. Terence, do you want to dive in here?
Yeah, actually, it's a question that's in the chat that I think is important for everyone to hear. Because of the nature of the different types of standardized exams or AP, industry credentials, just the forms all are different. The information cannot be extracted from all forms. So yes, non-military, you do have to manually create the student record. Military, because the Joint Services transcript from the Department of Defense is standardized, you can just scan the document and it'll extract most of the information you need to create a student record. But it just is the nature of industry credentials. If you're, coming from paramedic to fireside to post, they're all going to look different. So there isn't an optical scanning system that would be perfect to extract all that information.
Terence, I would like to add in that as well. There is a new process to batch upload students. So if you have a whole group like West LA, 150 real estate students, you don't have to manually put each one in. The way that they've done it is it's a CSV file that you'll add that student information in and upload. So you can upload all of those and their exhibits. That's where that exhibit title comes in handy, and make it much, much more streamlined.
In fairness, though, the individual college would have to create that CSV or Excel file first, correct?
Correct.
So there is some manual working with creating it. It just we can batch upload from your own internal lists. But work with Natalie and the ITPI team for that. We are coming up close to time. Eileen, let me get your question, though.
Just real quick, is there a reason why for awarding credit, a grade for CPL is a pass instead of a different letter grade?
So credit by examination, fine for letter grades. all other CPL, we highly recommend you do not use some type of grading or proportional metric for a traditional letter grade, that you use pass, not pass. Many courses, though, when you look in your catalog, many do not have that option. So I think Gwyer brought that up. We're going to work on a statewide work group, another work group, yay, because of all the different student information systems that we have, the ERBs that we have. We're looking at standardizing of the indexing of how to, the right characters to use for CPL, but also grading options. And the recommendation really is, when possible, make it pass, not pass, so that when you do CPL, there's not grade inflation or GPA deflation. We don't want it one way or the other. The preference is pass, not pass. So hope that answers the question. It deals with curricular revision on a lot of places, though. Natalie, can we go to the next slides? And folks, if you need more on the MAP platform, we do have videos, but if you're a MAP college, get in with the ITPI team. They're going to help you out specifically for your institution. Please do add additional questions. We're going to try to save this chat. Don't trust me. Hopefully Lenny or someone else is going to save it. But put it on that Padlet. If you have additional questions or comments, please add it to the Padlet so we can save that for later and follow up with you folks. When you're leaving the room right now, thank you for all your input, guys. I really appreciate this. It's going to really move the whole MAP initiative forward for our reentry adult students. Make sure you do leave the breakout room. Don't leave the meeting, or else you're going to be logging right back in. It's time to head back to the main session. So thank you for your time. And co-presenters, really appreciate you, Gwyer, Natalie. You guys are awesome. Appreciate your time today.